Funding for this program was provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.
He was really a wonderful man and really knew what he was doing. He always was very much on the details, and everything was so organized and so planned, so he knew how to prepare his football team to meet the challenge.
In the world of Louisiana football, Paul Dietzel is an icon. Head coach of Louisiana State University's first national championship team, Paul managed to energize the state's sports fans and elevate the school's program to legendary status.
When you put on that yellow helmet, it meant something to you. When you put on the blazer that had LSU across the pocket, you knew that you were part of a tradition of something very, very good. He taught us to be very, very proud, not cocky, but very, very proud.
A lieutenant in the Army Air Corps, Paul flew a dozen missions against Japan while only in his 20s. At Miami University in Ohio, he earned All-State and All-American honors as a center. At the age of 30, after coaching beside greats like Bear Bryant and Vince Lombardi, he took over LSU's fledgling football program in 1955. Coach Dietzel managed only 11 wins during this first 3 years, but that would change by 1958 as he began to wear down opponents with a revolutionary 3-team system.
At a point in time when you were playing offense and defense, this man came up with the brilliance of first, second, third, white, go, and bandits, and the Chinese bandits stole the heart, in my opinion, of the sports world in college football. Everybody in the world wanted to be a Chinese bandit.
With an 11-0 season, the Tigers were the 1958 undisputed National Football Champions and Sugar Bowl victors. Paul won the National Coach of the Year award by the widest margin ever recorded and was the youngest person ever to receive it. And to this day, Paul's team remains the only undefeated football team in LSU history.
He put LSU on the map. That's what drove LSU to prominence for 20 or 30 years since then.
Nicknamed Pepsodent Paul for his winning smile, Paul led LSU to 2 SEC titles, 2 Sugar Bowl trips, and an Orange Bowl appearance. Although he left in 1962 for a coaching job at West Point, he returned 16 years later as LSU's athletic director. Paul's career has allowed him to associate with presidents and personalities, but any success he attributes to his faith and a devoted, loving family. Today, as an accomplished watercolor artist, Paul Dietzel maintains the focused intensity that makes him a Louisiana legend. Hello, I'm Beth Courtney. We're in the home of legendary football coach Paul Dietzel, and I've known you many years, and so thank you for having us in your home.
Well, thank you. I'm very pleased to have you here.
Well, I have to tell you that when I went to LSU, you had just left, but your shadow was big. I mean, everybody was talking about you. So how important has LSU been to you in your career?
Well, I think the thing about LSU is you might leave LSU, but LSU never leaves you. And I think that sooner or later, it seems like most everyone ends up back in Baton Rouge. And Baton Rouge takes a lot of licks from a lot of people who don't live here. But Baton Rouge is a very fascinating place, and it kind of grows on you. And I don't mean just the food, but the people here are about as warm and friendly as anyone I've ever known. So we're back here again, and I'm very happy to be back here.
Well, we're so happy to have you, and we're going to look back a little at some of your earlier career. And you began not as a Southerner, but in Ohio. Mm-hmm. And a very, your early childhood wasn't that easy, was it?
Well, I think like a lot of people, when you grow up and you have a broken family, that's quite of a traumatic thing. And I think in many ways in my case, I know it made me grow up a little early. And of course, we really had to work for whatever we had. And it taught me very early in life that nobody's going to give you anything, that you have to work for what you're going to get.
Well, Coach Dietzel, you certainly have been consistent in one very important aspect of your life. You've been married to a lovely woman for 60 years. When did you first meet Ann?
66 years to be exact.
66 years.
And, well, you know, in high school, as it happens a lot of times when you are an athlete, you have a tendency to think, I think it's normal, you just think that you're pretty good, you know. And I remember I went, athletics had me by the throat all the way through high school because I went from football to track, basketball, football, basketball, track, so forth. And I was going home from track practice one day, and I was in junior in Mansfield High School. And we had 1,300 students in the upper 3 grades. And I walked by this one room, and I heard this clickety, clickety, you know, clicking typewriter. And I looked in, and there's this good-looking gal in there. And I knew who she was, but I'd never been properly introduced to her. And I think she knew who I was. And, of course, I thought I was pretty hot stuff, you know. I think I dated her for a couple of months before she ever let me kiss her goodnight. And that really impressed me. I mean, I thought that's pretty good. And then I said, well, I want to bring my records over. No, we don't do that. But my parents had broken up, and so I really didn't have a quote home as such. But Ann's parents, that was Ann Wilson Dietzel, but Ann's parents were very wonderful to me. And they kind of took me under their wing, I think, and they treated me just like a member of the family. And I had some great experiences with them riding around the countryside. They like to do that, and this is kind of a new experience for me. I didn't know you did that sort of thing. But in any event, Ann was a great cook, and she still is, and she's a master cook for cakes and pies.
Well, now, all right, so here you are, the big football star. You finally get your sweetheart to go out with you, and you're going off to Duke to play football. And then a little something interrupted called World War II.
Yeah, I should say it did.
Yeah.
It interrupted a lot of people, and in those days, of course, when Japan attacked us on Pearl Harbor, everyone wanted to go down and enlist right now. And so, but I went down and signed up, as you're required to do then, to sign up for the selective service. And then by chance, how soon you would be called in. But I went to Duke down there on a football scholarship. And by the way, I was not a star. I was one of the players. But in any event, I got mixed in with some of the real good players, and I got a scholarship to go to Duke. And I was trying to decide whether I was going to go to Duke or Lehigh because I wanted to take engineering. Halfway through spring practice, I got the word that I was going to be drafted. So I went home. Immediately, and I wanted to enlist in the Army Air Corps. I didn't want to go into the infantry. Not that I have anything against the infantry, but I always wanted to fly. And so I went home and I took the test and I went into the service. And that's where I started my Army Air Corps. And anytime you tell them, say you were in the Army Air Corps, that dates you because it is no longer the Army Air Corps. It's now the Air Force.
And you flew B-29 bombers and in the Pacific, and some pretty memorable missions.
Well, I had several thrilling experiences in that thing, and I think one of the darndest things that happened to me was we were assigned to lay the mines in Korea. And that meant that you had to fly over the Japanese Empire, and after you landed, you have to go back. And I mean, when you drop your mines, then you have to go back and do it again because you crossed over the empire twice, going and coming. And that was a time that Japan had they had gotten a little bit less combative because they just didn't have the same amount of airplanes and so forth. And that's when they started with this kamikaze, they called them. In other words, this flying bomb. And it means that they take off with no landing gear, and this is nothing but a flying rocket. and they would ram you. What they're trying to do is, this is what their purpose was.
Mission,
yeah, it's suicide mission. We call them the ball of fire. And so we're flying away, going back over the Japanese Empire, and it's about, I guess it must have been about 3 o'clock in the morning. And all of a sudden, in the distance, our top gunner, who was named Joe Roos, he said, "Ball of fire, 9 o'clock level." Man, you talk about everyone waking up. I mean, everyone came to attention immediately. And now our eyes are glued on 9 o'clock level to see this ball of fire. And sure, there it came. And I was really scared. I mean, there's no doubt about it. My knees were shaking like this. I was scared. And I held the throat mic to my throat, because that's where your mic was. And I said, "Don't shoot till he gets close." And I stopped. I didn't do it very long, because I didn't want him to hear my quavering in my voice. And so we fly a little bit long, and all of a sudden the clouds part. It's the sun coming up. Oh. And I'm telling you, now all of a sudden it's real funny. And everyone thought, "Hey, yeah, you guys were really scared." Well, when we land, and Joe Roos, the same Joe Roos, came over to me and said, "Lieutenant, could I talk to you, please?" I said, "Sure, Joe, what's up?" He said, "I just want to tell you, if you hadn't been so calm over the target, I'd have bailed out." And I said, "Joe, calm? My knees were shaking. I was the scaredest guy in the airplane. Anyone that says they're not scared when they get in a situation like that, he's either stupid or he's out of his mind. I mean, we're all scared. Everybody's scared. That's a normal thing. The thing is, you've got to do your job when you're scared." But at the end of after it was over, I can't say this without, it was such a thing that stayed with me my whole life. And I think that that experience of those war years and taking part with a bunch of other guys and making it back, and some of your good friends didn't, and it really
changed
has to be
life forever, right?
Yep. When you went back to school, and a coach that had coached at Denison, then he was at Miami University, Sid Gilman. And while I was in Tinian, Sid kept writing me. And he had a chance to get acquainted with this cheerleader, whose name was Ann Wilson. It was really goofy. But Ann kept talking to me about coming to Miami instead of going back to Duke. And of course, Sid was telling me about how great it was going to be and everything. And so I didn't have much of a chance when the war was over. It was obvious I was going back to Miami, or going to Miami. And that was a wonderful experience, and I think one of the greatest things in my life. It changed. That has a tendency to change.
Seeing your mortality early on, and then seeing what's really important in life too, I suppose. And so, you and Ann married, and you had a great career there, and you didn't. At one point, I understand you were thinking about being a doctor.
When I went to Duke, I was taking engineering. I wanted to be an engineer, I thought. But when I went back to Miami, I thought, no, I'm going to be a surgeon. And so I took college prep for pre-medical training, and that's where I was going to go. And when I graduated from Miami, Sid offered me a job as a graduate assistant football coach. And so I went out to coach football.
And the rest is history. I'm looking at, you worked with Vince Lombardi.
Yeah.
You worked with Bear Bryant when he was, I didn't even realize, this is terrible. Everybody knows that he was at the University of Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And so you worked with, some of the greats then.
Well,
did you know they were great then?
No, I didn't know they were great, but they were a whole lot better than I was. And I know my first night at practice, and when I was at Miami, one of the halfbacks asked me, "What do I do on this program, on this play?" I said, "I don't know what you do. I'm a center." In other words, I found out I didn't know very much about football either. But then Sid was invited to go to West Point, and Colonel Blake, who was in charge of the academy then, football that is, he asked Sid to bring along one of his assistants, one of his young coaches, to coach the plebes. So now I'm faced with this idea: do you want to go to West Point and be an assistant, or do you want to go to medical school? and take your chances on seeing whether you can make it or not. And I think that the coaching won out. And so you're right, I went into the coaching business, and I spent it for about 9 or 10 years as an assistant. And I was really lucky. I really had a chance to work with some of the, turns out, as you said, very fine people.
But I can't believe that when you ultimately came to LSU, came to us here in Louisiana, that you were head coach and you were 30 years old. Mm-hmm. Some people are still in school at this point, or they've moved home with their family at 30. I mean, you grew up a lot younger back then, it feels like. Did you feel like you knew what you were doing when you came in, your head coach at LSU and at 30?
No, I think I was so young that it didn't frighten me. I should have been frightened, I think, but I didn't. And I was very fortunate. I inherited a coaching staff, because the former coach had left, and the rest of the coaches were waiting to see what's going to happen to them, and they're hunting for a job, of course. And that's when I first got acquainted with that part of the program. And see, when I was coaching at Kentucky with Bear Bryant, I was the line coach, and Charlie McClendon was the graduate assistant. And so we had recruited together, and Dorothy Faye and Ann were good friends, and just wonderful people, by the way. And so when I got down here, I found out that, and I talking with Charlie, and he said, well, we've really got a fine staff here, if you could keep them. I said, well, they want me to keep the staff. So I inherited the whole staff. And as it turned out, it's one of the finest staffs I ever had.
Well, of course, anyone who remembers anything of those eras, and I of course remember this, the white team, the Go team, and the Chinese Bandits. How in the world did you, when I used to hear Chinese Bandits, that was, I used to think of Terry and the Pirates or something from World War. Is that where that came from?
That's exactly. See, you
you
really show your intelligence there, because not very many people would know. But I was the line coach at Cincinnati. And my heroes were Terry and the Pirates.
Terry and the Pirates were a comic strip.
Right.
At World War II, sort of.
And they were from the area. They were operating in the area that I had been. So
in the
there was
Pacific.
a tie-in.
Right.
And one of the comments was the Chinese Bandits are the most vicious and mean people in the world. I cut that out and I put it on the bulletin board. And I said, from now on, the defensive team is going to be known as the Chinese Bandits. Well, we didn't. I mean, if you try to do that now, we'd have all kinds of problems.
It would not be politically correct, I do not think.
But in any event, we had a good team, and we went to the Sun Bowl, and it was a wonderful experience. And Sid was just like my dad. I mean, he couldn't have been finer to me, and I owe so much to him, and to Red Blake, and to Paul Bear Bryant, and Vince Lombardi.
Well, 1958, you national champions. Was that just a fabulous year for you?
Yes, it was about as wonderful as it gets. I mean, I think the thing that was so wonderful about it was that it taught me that Napoleon was right when he said, it is morale over material 3-1. And he was right, because what we had the first team was in the white team, and they were, by the way, Ole Miss taught us this because the year before in '57, we were ahead of Ole Miss at the half, but we were playing one team and they played 3, and they beat us bad in the second half. And so we decided we're going to have more players. So we took our 11 best players, offense and defense, and they became the white team because they always wore white jerseys. And then what was left over, we took the best 11 offensive players, and they became the go team. Well, I called them a gold team first, but then they got shortened to go team. And naturally, what was left over, we took the best of what is left over, and they became the Chinese Bandits. And they wanted to know, what is this Chinese bandit routine,
That's a wonderful thing. And coming back home where you are really beloved in Louisiana, even though some people haven't forgiven you for going to West Point after leaving LSU, there was a lot of residual problems, I think. Do you think football is too dominant now in Louisiana?
Well, it's pretty dominant, I'll say that. And when I was a coach, I thought the more domination we could have, the better it was. But when you're not in the business anymore, and you see things that you really wish would be a little different, not anything against the sport, because football to me was, it hadn't been for football, I would have probably never gone to college. Maybe I wouldn't have, because I certainly couldn't pay my way. And so I owe a great deal to football, so I would never say anything against football. However, I will say that the salaries that they're paying coaches now, I know it's obscene, especially when you're jealous because you were born too soon. And, you know, when I see the salaries of these fellas, that an assistant coach is going to make $500,000 a year. Now, come on. The most I ever made as a football coach at LSU was $18,500.
Wow.
And there were no perks either.
Wow.
So my retirement is based on my $18,500. And so naturally I'm kind of envious in a way, but why envy anyone? I mean, it's just it's a different world. And it's a tough business too. And I think that the fans at LSU are not a whole lot different than fans other places, but if anything, they have a tendency to be a little impatient here. And the fact that Les Miles has turned down Michigan as he's going to stay here for the next 7 years, I think that's a great thing, because Les has done a fine job and I like him very much.
Do they consult you, other coaches or other folks come and ask your advice?
No, I wouldn't expect them to, because the game is different. When I was coaching, if we'd looked out there and saw four wideouts, we'd say, "Hey, wait a minute, what is going on here?" Because that was, I mean, that was unheard of. The closest thing we saw that was when we played in the Cotton Bowl against Texas Christian, and they used what is now called a wideout or spread, and no one else bothered to do it because it's just very different. And the players you're getting out of high school haven't done it, so it's easier to take a player who's been playing in this kind of a game, rather than to put him in a absolutely new environment. But the coaches are, I think in a way, I really resent the fact that the players leave before their scholarship is over. I think it's a shame, because if we'd had the rules when I was coaching that they have rules now, Billy Cannon would have never played past his sophomore year, because he would have been in the pros. And a lot of other players on that team, Johnny Robinson and Mel Branch and so forth.
Now you have a whole new career, and that's your painting.
Well,
That's just, tell us about that.
I think that what got me started in painting more than anything else was, after I had a heart bypass some 20-some years ago, I decided I was going to have to do something other than skiing. And so I decided I think I'm going to try painting. So I started painting, and one thing led to another, and some fella asked me if I would sell my painting to him, and I said, "You want to buy my painting?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Really? You're going to buy my painting?" He said, "Yes." "How much you want for it?" I said, What do you pay for them?" Yeah. I think I finally ended up. He probably saved me $35 for the painting, But this is a long time ago. And one thing led to another, and I found out that what wonderful libraries we have here in Baton Rouge. And I think I've showed my pictures in my paintings in every one of them.
Was it exciting this past season to come out? They finally honored a lot of the reunions of your '58 team, and you all are all pretty close still, aren't you?
Yes, I will say that I've told the players this many times, and it's really true. You don't know it, but these fellas that you're in this room with, in this huddle with, they're going to be the best friends for the rest of your life. Now, you might not think that's true, but it's true, because you have something that you have done together by the hardest, and it's going to stick with you for the rest of your life. These are going to be your best friends you'll ever have, and it's true.
Well, Paul Dietzel, we thank you for spending time with us. It's been too short a period of time. You are indeed a Louisiana legend, and it's a pleasure to know you as a friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
and thank
Beth.
you all for joining us on Louisiana Legends.
For a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or go online to www.lpb.org. Funding for this program was provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.